Welcome to Veteran Resource Podcast, where you will meet nonprofit organizations focused on improving the lives of veterans and their family members. Here is your host, Jeremy Paris.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 20 of the Veteran Resource Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Paris, and as I mentioned last week, I am still on vacation, and I am enjoying every minute of it, let me tell you. So you will not be getting an interview today, but I do have something really cool planned for you. You see, this is not the only veteran-focused podcast in town. There's a lot of other ones out there. So I am going to introduce you to some of the other podcasts that I listen to, and I got some really good ones for you. I'm going to be playing a short clip from each one just to give you a feel for what that podcast is about. And if you want more information, you can go to the show notes, and I'm going to have links taking you to all of the different podcasts. And you can go and you can listen to the rest of that episode, or you can listen to other episodes. I highly recommend that you subscribe to these. We already know that you like listening to veteran-focused podcasts because you're listening to mine. So go ahead and share the podcast love and give them a listen. Without any further ado, let me jump right into some of these podcasts. Okay, first on deck, we've got the Pop Smoke Show with Matt Pagan. This is a really cool show, and what's really interesting about it is that it is a video podcast, so you can listen to the audio if you want, or you can watch the video, and sometimes that's really cool to see the interaction that's going on there. Now, Matt interviews veteran artists, creatives, and entrepreneurs on his show, and I think that you're really going to enjoy what he has going on here. So I'm going to let you go ahead and listen to a short clip of episode 25 where he's interviewing Brittany Slay, who is a Navy veteran and now editor of American Veteran Magazine. I think you're going to enjoy this one a lot.
Can you share with the listener what played into your decision to transition out of the military? Because there's tons of factors that goes on with transition, and everyone's circumstance is different. But why did you decide to transition and join American Veterans?
AMVETS was, I'd never heard of a VSO when I was in the military. I don't think a lot of us did. You know, we don't know what a veterans service organization really does. And so when I saw the job posting and I saw that they're making a difference for the people that I served with and the people that served in previous wars, I thought it was a really good organization to be a part of. And not only are they helping, but they also have a magazine where they tell stories about veterans who are doing things that are pretty amazing. And I knew I wanted to be a part of that.
Awesome. Do you think the magazine portion was the kicker on why you decided? Like, what ultimately, when you weighed your pros and cons on where you wanted to end up, what was the kicker for you in deciding to join them?
100% the magazine.
Was it?
I'm a creative type, so being a part of an organization and getting to run a magazine, that's the coolest thing I could have ever asked for.
Nice. Awesome. What about since you've been with American Veterans? I know it's only been for a short amount of time, but can you share with us one of your lessons learned so far? A mistake you might have made while you were there for 2 to 3 months? What's a lesson learned you can share with the listener to help us, from potentially making the same mistake?
Something that I did when I was first there was very gung-ho to look for story sources and find people to be a part of the magazine. And I alienated quite a few people just looking for story sources because I was so like, woohoo, like let's get these amazing people out there. So I was able to get Jessica Lynch in my first week of work. However, I think I totally annoyed her and her PR people.
So you were kind of jumping through hoops and talking directly to the people, whereas you might have been rushing relationships a little bit.
Not so much that. I tend to backdoor PR agents. Like I don't want to speak to your PR agent because we all know what that's like. Those are the people that say, oh, Ariana Grande wasn't licking donuts. She was just sniffing them. She was looking at them, so those are the people that polish your relationship and make you look better than you are. And I want the real story.
I like that.
twist it. I'm not a twisty journalist. So to me, I'd rather just talk to the person, get a feel for them.
I like that. Now, did you go to school for journalism?
Sort of. I was an English major starting out, and then I realized that nobody makes any money being an English major unless you want to be a teacher. So I dropped out, joined the Navy, and then during that time, I started writing for an e-magazine called altdaily.com in Norfolk, Virginia. And I realized that I loved it that much that I wanted to continue doing it. So I changed my major from IT over to business with a minor in communications.
Okay, next up, we have One Too Many Veteran Suicides with host Tim Lawson. And I think that this is a really important podcast. Tim is interviewing survivors and friends and family who have lost someone to suicide. And I love what he's doing. I really think that this is going to go a long way to helping a lot of people. So make sure you give this one a listen and tell other people about it.
Now he's struggling with getting employment outside of the military, which is why I'm doing so much now to help all those active duty members get more training before they leave. And even when they're out, there really aren't services in place for this. So he's struggling with getting a job. He's struggling with his weight again. He's struggling with smoking. Ultimately, on July 8th, he ended up sending me a Facebook message. And it's this long message, and he has all these problems and struggles, and he's just like, I'm tired, man. I'm tired. At that point, I knew like something was up, and I was like, all right, well, hey, bud, like in 4 days is my birthday. I can't come home like right away. So do me something. Go to my, go spend time, go up to New York and celebrate my birthday with my mom and pop. He's like, yeah, sure thing. And I'm like, dude, October is 3 months away. So like you make the 3 months, make it last. You got this, dude. Like, you'll be out. You'll be back home in New York. You still have 2 years to go to school. Like, there are options for him, and we'd spoken about this and always having a plan to move forward. Because both of us in our lives had our whole lives drop. The one person you want to spend the rest of your life with says they don't anymore. You got to start from scratch. I'm like, dude, we've done this before. You can do this again. Like, you have that pride of being a Marine and having, junior Marines look up to you, and they become your friends, and you forge that family, and then you're done. I wish he would be around to see the veteran community is, it's not just Marines. Now you have Marines, soldiers, sailors, airmen, coasties. You've got the whole DOD is now your family. Like, it's not to say it's a better feeling. Nothing's a better feeling than being a Marine, but it's a great feeling. You still have that camaraderie family. So eventually I got this message. It was my birthday, so July 12th again. I don't know how the military just knew to send me different places on my birthday. Iraq. Now I'm in Hawaii in 2011. I wake up bright and early. I was part of the Command General Inspection Team. So I'm out there doing an inspection, and I've got brief colonels and all majors and all in a high capacity role here. And I get these messages, happy birthday, and 3 stick out. One was from a buddy of mine, Troy, who was actually my team leader in Iraq, also was friends with Daniel. And he said, hey, buddy, I know it's your birthday, but you need to call me. I'm like, all right, that's weird. Another message right below that was a sergeant that was above Daniel and I. We're all, in the same peer group. She said the same thing. I hope you haven't heard the news yet. You need to call me as soon as you can. And I was in Hawaii, so they sent me the numbers you can directly link from Hawaii to Quantico and without being long distance. So I call him up, and this is when I'm still scrolling through Facebook, and I see his message, and it says, "You're the best friend I've ever had." And that's that. And I'm like, oh, my heart sunk, and I'm on the phone at the same time, and both hit me at once. And you go through the initial stages of depression and shock, and I knew it was true. I'd just spoken to him 4 days prior, and I'm like, I know it. You have that feeling, that gut feeling that's like, you don't want to believe it, but it's true.
Your mind starts patching together all the information that you have, and yeah.
Right, and my whole thing is he's always told me, like, move forward. That's all you can do. Like, remember and have memories, but always need to move forward. So it's the first thing I did. I set him on the phone, and I was like, look, I'm in Hawaii. Like, now I've just got him watching over me, and I just wanted to take the high road in the best way possible. And I knew I was still in shock, and I understand how the mind works. And, like, I just need to let it take its course.
Okay, Timothy Lawson has another podcast out there called Fuel for Warriors. And this one features military veterans, athletes, and other warriors to discover what challenges they face and what ultimately inspires them. And in this episode that you're about to hear is my podcasting mentor, John Lee Dumas, and he always gives a great interview. So give this a listen, and I'm sure you're going to want to listen to the rest of the episode after you're done hearing this.
Now, if I remember right, you were a part of the first commissioned class after 9/11. Is that right?
Yeah, so 9/11 happened, obviously, September 11th, 2001, and we were the first class of commissioned officers, which was that year, or that same school year, where we graduated May 17th, 2002. So we were the first class commissioned post 9/11.
Very cool. So now we've learned a little bit about you as a warrior. I need to talk to you a little bit about you as a podcaster, because that's what you are to everybody else. Today, I have just discovered, I guess it's been out for a couple months. I didn't know. But today I just discovered a podcast called The Ancient.
What? You found that? A little passion project.
Yeah, and so I have to, and it ties well into with the theme of this show, because it's a fantasy story that you're telling. Yeah, think Lord of the Rings,
think Game of Thrones.
Yeah. So, I'll let you pitch it to the audience, because I just discovered it today, so I'm only like halfway through the prologue episode. But I am a fan of Game of Thrones. I love playing RPGs that have like the same themes and stuff like that. So this is a realm that I can enjoy really easily. So, but I'm not as familiar with it, obviously, as you are, because you wrote it like 13 years ago or something like that, right?
I wrote it during my 13-month deployment to Iraq. Like, every single word of The Ancients was written on a laptop from like month 2 to month 12 during my deployment. And it is a behemoth of a book. We're talking like Lord of the Rings size, truly. It's massive amounts of work. 250 typed word pages, Microsoft Word, which equates out to like 600 or 700 on a normal sized book. So it's a massive book, and it's just kind of sat there, and I completed it. It's over. The book was finished, but I just never really did anything with it. I did when I was in law school. I pitched it to a few publishers, back in the day. This is 2007, back before people were really doing Kindle or anything like that. And, it was just so disgusting how terrible the traditional path was for authors back then. I feel so bad. And I feel so lucky for all the people that are, now publishers and authors, because it's just a different ballgame. Actually, I feel bad for the publishers, but I feel glad for the authors because it's so amazing.
Next up is Veteran on the Move with Joe Crane. And I've been listening to this podcast for a while now. Before I even started my own podcast, I was listening to Veteran on the Move. It's got some great information. He has awesome guests, and he has a great way of pulling the information out of them with the questions that he's asking. In this episode, Joe is going to be interviewing Tony Cross, who is a Marine veteran and a CEO. I think you're going to enjoy this one also.
Yeah, Tony, you're obviously in tune and highly in touch with the issue that veterans are going through right now. You hit on so many key points that we see here all the time, even with veterans talking about trying to transition to entrepreneurship. And one of the things you touched on a couple times was self-promotion. It's absolutely true. In the military, if you're in your platoon, your company, your battalion, your squadron, whatever it may be, you go around tooting your own horn, you're going to get knocked down because you don't self-promote above the rest of the members of your team. It's all about the team effort and unit integrity. And it's drilled into us, and so we don't do that, and we're not comfortable with it. and we almost think of it as a bad thing. And if done in the wrong way, it is a bad thing. But it's really tough to get veterans to self-promote because it's something they're used to being told not to do, and they're just not comfortable with doing it.
Well, I would say this too. I mean, I had an incredible career, prior drill instructor. I mean, first of all, I love the Marines. I love the camaraderie. But one of the things I've had to learn to do in my transition, I personally am motivated daily. I'm 55 years old. I wake up with a great attitude. Not everybody, that is a choice. That is a choice. And to your point, I think you have to learn to manage yourself. I mean, there is a difference between promoting yourself versus, having this ego. You know what I mean? And I think humility speaks of that. I mean, when you get confident in who you are and understand that what you bring to the table and realize that you don't know everything. I mean, just like with this organization, I'm so privileged to have the people working for me, because what I've realized over having this organization is that it takes all of us as a team to make this class realize the gravity of just how big transition is. And I touched on it this morning because I always stop into the class and I can tell there's a couple people in there that's a little edgy. They're, just their attitude. They don't realize that their attitude comes off a little strong or comes off negatively. And when I speak of job ready today, that can hurt you. And I think it's important for them to understand it's okay to talk about yourself, but you also have to talk about the humility that we face. I've got, a couple folks work for me that's had incredible challenges, in alcoholism and some other things. It doesn't mean you can't recover from that. But I think the first thing you have to do, admit that you just don't know everything and you need help. And I think once we get past that ego, I'll use myself as an example. I mean, being a Marine jarhead and personally motivated, and quite frankly, we're geared just a little different sometimes. And at 55 years old, I'm glad I have that ability, but I've also learned to manage it so that I can communicate with other people in this class to realize, say, hey, we're all in this together. And by the way, you're part of our alumni now. We're going to take care of you.
Here is another great entrepreneurial type podcast for veterans, and this one is called Command Your Business with Scott Fussell. You're going to be hearing episode 86, where Scott is talking to Matt Butler, who is an inventor. He invented this cool game called Rollers, which is like an outdoor game, kind of similar to bocce ball and a little bit like horseshoes. And you're going to have to listen to the episode and find out more about it because it sounds really cool. It's something that I would love to go out and buy myself. So give this one a listen too.
I'd love to hear, you're still serving on active duty. How you, kind of getting to the start of Rollers, on how you came up with the idea, and kind of talk about how were you able to manage building it to the point that you have while still having a very committed career and a lot of quote unquote daytime commitments.
Well, it really comes down to time management. There's things that I used to enjoy doing. I enjoyed anything outdoors, which is part of the reason how I developed the product. But I used to play a lot of golf. I used to fish, and a lot of the extracurricular activities, if you will, have been put on hold because I've started this business. So it's also priorities, and that's my priority. It's always my Air Force job. It's my family. And now I've put the Rollers Game Company into a higher priority than all my extracurricular type things. And that's kind of how I weigh that out. I'll come home after work and I'm spending, time up to, 10, 11, sometimes later, emailing people back, and working with retail buyers. There's all sorts of things. So I'm on the computer late at night, and so I guess also TV as well. I love to sit in front of TV and watch, but that's also taken its back seat to the business.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to anyone that maybe either is still serving or has, like me, I have a, quote unquote daytime career. You have time, you whatever your current employer is, if you have an employer or you're serving, you're not serving 24/7 unless you're deployed, obviously. You have more time in the day. That employer may have you from 9 to 5 or whatever your work hours may be, but there is so much time left in the day You can get up an hour earlier. You can spend that time, to your point, in the evenings if you have time on your lunch break, and you can cut out a lot of that stuff that a lot of people are unwilling to do. And the time is there if you want to make it.
Exactly it. There's dedication and there's persistence. And the big takeaway is nothing is going to happen overnight with anything that you do, especially starting a business. It is really the analogy, you're trying to roll a rock or a boulder up a hill, and it just really it's a lot of effort in the beginning. But once you educate yourself, and once you learn, once you smooth out some areas that are rough, and there is always going to be rough areas in the business, and your goal is to smooth those out a little at a time. And I've got a to-do list, and it seems like it's always increasing and never decreasing. I mean, I go through it and I knock out one thing at a time, and I just, again, I prioritize that list, or what are the things that I need to do, and I kind of prioritize out from a near term and a mid-term and a far term, or what are the things that I need to accomplish.
And the last clip I have for you is the Veteran Artist Program podcast with B.R. McDonald. And you have heard about the Veteran Artist Program in previous episodes. Episode 2, I believe he was in. And I've talked about the Veteran Artist Program numerous times since I am on the staff. But I also wanted to give you a little clip right here that you can hear. This one I think you're really going to enjoy also. This is Jason Everman, and he was in Nirvana and Soundgarden before going and joining active duty, and he went special ops. I think that this is going to be another one of those episodes that you're going to go back and listen to the entire thing. And make sure when you're over there you subscribe to the Veteran Artist Program podcast also. And now let's roll the clip.
So now you're back in New York, or at least you are right now, and you're going to grad school. What are you studying, and where are you going?
Well, I finished my undergrad at Columbia last year, or two years ago, 2013, in philosophy. And this summer I'm starting a master's program in military history through Norwich. It's like online.
Okay. Wow. So what are your hopes for that degree and through philosophy? And do you have, is it just kind of take it as it comes, or do you have a goal in mind?
In broad strokes, yeah. Maybe as a writer and academic, or maybe both, I guess that's kind of broad strokes what I'm looking at.
You talked about, I think it's that wanderlust probably, or just the hopeless romantic. Is that why philosophy? Is it in an effort to kind of make sense of things? And what drew you to that? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I've always liked to think about things. That being said, I'm probably not very good at it.
I doubt that. I'm sure you are.
And even like post Ivy League degree, I'm probably still not that good at it, but I still like doing it. And if anything, earning a degree in philosophy helped me kind of formalize my thinking process a bit, so it's not so scattered.
Sure. And
it's still a pleasure to do, but I think that the paradox is you never really find any answers.
I'll tell you from the outside. I mean, I'm wondering what the reaction has been from people you've met, or professors, or just general fans. I'm sure you have those of having a background. So you come from a professional music background, having played in some, Nirvana and Soundgarden, some known bands, and then you're in the military at a high level. Now you're out and you have a philosophy degree. Like, what is the reaction that people have to that?
I guess some people find, it's a curiosity, I guess, or it's not the norm.
Well, how about you? Like, when you look back at that now, like where you are now, 20 years later, are you able to look at that time period a little bit different? And what do you take from it? I'm talking about the time period, like when you were playing music professionally.
Yeah, 20 years ago, I probably would have never predicted I would, be where I am now, just in my life. That being said, I think the person I was like 20 years ago, 25 years ago would look at me now and go, oh, good work, because I'm actually in a really good place. I've never been happier.
Good.
There's always going to be that hunger for more, but overall I'm pretty satisfied with what I've created so far as my life.
I was in music my whole life, and then I studied opera actually in college. I was on my way to Broadway, do the music. And I remember those moments. It was the summer of 2001 when I started to tell people, I think I'm going to do something else. I'm thinking about the Army. I'm thinking about languages. And I remember people kind of saying, oh, you'll be back, or you'll get it out of your system, or, it was 9/11 timeframe, so people kind of got it. But I'm wondering about that time for you, and like now when you talk to old bandmates or people that are maybe still in the industry, what is that relationship like, and how do they look at your journey?
That's funny, because I was back west last week, and I was talking to an old friend of mine from that time period who was kind of around during that whole process.
Sure.
And I guess the people I knew back then kind of fall into two categories. And those are the people who knew me well, which was the minority, and then everyone else, people who just kind of knew me peripherally or not that well or whatever. And the people who knew me well, when they heard or when I told them about my decision, they were like, oh yeah, of course you would do that. It seemed like, oh, that's something you would do.
Right.
The people who didn't know me well were the ones who were like, what the fuck? Those are the ones who didn't get it.
Yeah, sure.
And I also have an honorable mention for you. I tried to get a clip of this podcast into this episode. I was having a lot of technical difficulties with trying to get it exported. I don't know if it was the podcast player or if it was the fact that I was on a Mac and using a weird browser or what the deal was, but no matter what I tried, I just couldn't get it. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to point a link to it in the show notes. This is The Journey of Success, and it's with Chris Samples, and Chris is somebody who reached out to me about my podcast. He said that he found my podcast a week before he was going to retire from the military, and he said that the Veteran Resource Podcast was exactly what he was looking for with him getting out. And then I found out that he had his own podcast, The Journey of Success, and I started listening to that, and I love what he's doing there. In episode 38, he interviewed Jeff Woods of the Mentee podcast, who is another podcast that I listen to every single episode that it comes out. I love what Jeff Woods is doing. So make sure you listen to episode 38 of The Journey of Success with Chris Samples. And like I said, you can go to the show notes. I'm going to have links in the show notes to all of the different clips that were mentioned in this episode, to include The Journey of Success, which was not there, unfortunately. And I guess I need to mention where you can find the show notes. The show notes can be found at veteranpodcast.com/020. That's right, this is episode 20. And as I mentioned before, episode 21 next week, we'll have another interview. So we're going to be back in the regular rotation. And if you like these podcasts, or if there's another veteran-focused podcast out there that I missed that you might be listening to, go ahead and send me a tweet at ParisJ13. I'd love to find out what other veteran-focused podcasts are out there and maybe add them to the podcast that I listen to on a regular basis. That's it for now. We'll see you in episode 21.